Welcome back to the channel. This is the Battle Done, and today I have a very special guest and an interesting topic: UFO sightings. On this channel, what I do is I analyze things through my Worldview warfighting architecture. So today we're going to focus on revolutionary worldview warfighting. What does that mean? That means that on the individual level, you're going to see aspects of psychological warfare. On the collective level, you're going to see social engineering. On the spiritual level, you're going to see spiritual warfare. Now, revolutionary worldview warfighting, there's 5 components to it. The first component, the zeitgeist. In this episode, the time we're dealing with, the late 20th century through the early 21st century, the space, the deep south, particularly Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. And the ideological term is UFO. Why is this term an ideological term? Is because UFO can refer to both the object as well as some entity that is signified by the object, or some entity that is behind, driving, conducting, controlling the object. Then we have technique. That's our second component. Technique is technology plus culture. Technology, what's gonna be teased through in this episode, is low tech and high tech. Culturally speaking, we got 7 aspects of culture: religion, politics, economics, philosophy, art, science, and law. Not gonna hit on all of those. Gonna hit on a few of them though. Science, physics, how these objects move. Then we have art, how these objects look. Some of these representations can be found in science fiction, for example. We have philosophy, the philosophical questions like, why me? Why am I having this experience or these experiences? Then religion, we have things like hinted at. We have UFO religion. Now, this episode doesn't come from the perspective of UFO religion. Rather, when you're listening, I want you to think about how these sightings can be used to promote a UFO religion. This brings us to the propaganda. Now, for more background, deeper learning about this, take a look at the resource that I cite in my book, Partridge, Partridge. If you want to learn more about this. So we have, again, in propaganda, we have agitation, we have integration. That's part of our active propaganda. Then within sub-propaganda, we have our myths and conditioned reflexes. So when we speak about what integrative messaging comes through when in the context of UFO sightings, well, one of the things that these sightings can serve to do is develop mythologies that lend towards social cohesion of tight-knit groups. Some of the sub-propaganda that this taps into is the sacralized narrative of how reality could or should be. On the agitative front, we have the uneasiness, the sometimes anger, the helplessness that accompany UFO sightings. This taps into something that propaganda does, which is it plays upon the target audience's pre-existing spiritual heart issues. One of those is the spirit of fear, and you're going to see the spirit of fear come up again and again in this episode. Let's get into wicked deception. Now, one of the things that's promoted through UFO religion is this concept of the higher evolved being that is behind, guiding, driving the UFO. If you do deeper research into UFO religions, the people that found many of these more influential UFO religions, they are influenced heavily by theosophy. Then we get to revolution, which is the purpose of revolutionary worldview warfare. Because again, if we're thinking about these crafts as being piloted or symbolizing, signifying some higher evolved being, and since that being is being approached from a worshipful standpoint, then that being is in the place of the divine. There are two takes on divinity. Again, worldview deals with our view of ourself and the other, especially when the other is the divine. So you got two takes on that, either that the divine and the self are two, or that the divine and the self are one. And so what we're going to see throughout this episode is that you can begin to gather how a UFO sighting can lead a person towards thinking that the self and the divine are one. The perspective that's going to be taken throughout this episode, though, is that the self and the divine are two. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds with my worldview warfighting architecture. So I'm just going to let this episode play, and I hope that you enjoy. Good evening, everyone. This is Donald Davis, and this is going to be a mini-series here. We're going to discuss UFOs in the American South. So in this first part of the mini-series, I have a special guest. It's actually my mom, Violet Davis, and she is very well-known and respected member of the community in Jasper, Alabama, and many people in the surrounding area know her very well. Also, she was a police officer for a number of years, and actually one of the first black female officers for the city of Jasper, Alabama. So she's very credible and also skilled in observation. So I'm going to let her speak for a moment. We're going to cover the states of Mississippi, Alabama, and if we have time, we're going to also explore Tennessee and Georgia as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let Violet speak to you.
Hello, radio audience. I was going to speak to you a little about some encounters with the UFOs, if I may say so. The first one was in Jasper. As a police officer, I was leaving work and on my way home to Sipsey, a little place outside of Jasper there where I was born and raised at. And on going home, I happened to look out the window on the driver's side. I was driving, and there was a craft up above me, not too far to where I couldn't find out, that it really wasn't an airplane. At first, I thought it was a blimp. And as I noticed it between driving and looking up at it, I soon learned that it was not a blimp because it was around more of a flat object. And it had lights around it, but they were all just one color, and it was not blinking. There was no sound or anything coming from this craft. And I said, oh, my Lord, what is this? And I just couldn't, because at that time, UFOs were not a familiar topic, not sightings around the area there, which I had heard about them before, but just had never encountered any. So I just would listen to what some of the people say and just brush it on off and go on my way. But this particular evening, I saw this for myself, and it was going right along beside me, but it was up in the air. It did not ever leave the whole while I was driving on 7A Highway going into Sipsey. And when I turned off to go on the Sipsey Road, it turned, but it was still in the air, and it kept right up with me. So when I was approaching my turn off in Sipsey to go to my house, this craft just shot straight over me. And went around the opposite side of the community where I live. And I just stopped and I watched it till it got out of sight. So I just went on to my house, but I was looking in the skylines around to see that I see it, and I never did see it anymore. But now, that frightened me. And I was hesitant really to tell anyone about it because I didn't want them to think. I wanted to first hear of anyone else seeing this, but I never did hear anyone say they really saw this. And my twin sister saw it, of course, and I forgot in the beginning to tell you that she was in the car with me, and she saw it. And we still couldn't figure out what it was, but we did arrest that it was not a blimp. And that was my first encounter. So the next time it was, I was in Mississippi visiting my relatives there. They had property there, and I was sitting on the porch, and their front porch, and I happened to look over, and there was this craft going back and forth, and I didn't think much of it at first because our Air Force base is close there, very close there in Columbus. And so every time I look up, I would see it either going this way or that way, back and forth, back and forth. And at that time, I did not realize that it was coming closer to me on that while I was sitting there on the porch. So as I watched it, I realized that it was coming closer because it was getting larger and larger. So I got up and ran in the house and was telling my cousin about it. And he told me, this happened all the time. I see this all the time. Everybody around the area see. So he went on to tell me about an incident that they were hunting down on the river, and this craft came. And they were looking at it, and it didn't land. It was hovering up above them. And one of my cousins threw up his gun to shoot at it. And they wrestled him and took the gun, knocked it down. Because when he pointed the gun at the craft, my cousin told me that another small craft shot out from in this larger craft. And they didn't know whether they was going to be attacked by them or what, but they knocked the gun out of the other boy's hand. And they soon left because they didn't know what was going to happen after then. So they just got up and they left peacefully without anything, other incidents happening with their craft. But that wasn't the first time. They say that had happened. Say they see it all the time. And so my twin sister was sitting on the porch, and she saw the same thing. But, of course, it just like to have scared her to death, which this frightened me, too, because it was coming closer and closer, and I was wondering in my mind, what was they wanting, or had anybody down there ever seen anybody on it or get off of it or anything, but nobody seemed to have saw anything like that. If they did, they didn't say anything about it to us while we were there and everything. But this was a round craft, and it was large, very large. It was room size. So I know for myself that really happened. I saw this with my eyes. It wasn't sleep, wasn't a dream or anything. And because the sun was just about to set, and it was a silverish blue craft with lights around it. The lights looked reddish orange all around. They wasn't blinking or anything. They were just around this craft, and the closer it got, the larger you could see that it was. And that was the encounter in Mississippi. So I'm going to give it back to Don now and let him tell you something, other incidents.
So the next sighting I'm going to explain was it occurred when I was in middle school. The first two experiences that my mom just explained happened before I was born, and a couple of years before I was born, in the early 80s, and fast forward to mid-90s and mid to late 90s, and we lived in Jasper, Alabama at the time, on the outskirts of the city, and some other family members had been over to visit with us, and they had decided to leave right around dusk time. So it was evening time. Like I said, the sun had pretty much set, but it was just after the sun had set, so it was still quite a bit of light outside. And so me and my mom had walked with my cousin and her kids as they went to their car, and as they drove away, we just continued to stand out there and talk with each other, and was watching my dogs play in the yard. And once they drove about 125 yards from the house, which was where my nearest neighbor's house was, the road made a left turn, and at that point the road was behind some trees, so we couldn't see the car anymore, but I could guess where their car was on the road, and I was actually looking at in that part of the tree line, and when I looked up, I saw when I looked up above the tree line, I saw this craft, and it was approaching. No sound. The color was it was like a dull, like gray color. It was like a metallic color. The light on it, the light went from left to right at kind of a slow pace around the craft. I was assuming the light went all the way around the craft. I could only see from one side of it. Cigar-shaped looking craft. It seemed to me to be round in shape, but I couldn't see like the top or the bottom. I could only see it from the front. Now, one thing that I want to focus on is dealing with the lights. So the lights for this particular UFO, they look like the lights, the stadium lights, okay, where you have these multiple bulbs that create the light source. So it was something about this aspect of the object. It really struck me as low tech. It's like, okay, so as the light is moving from right to left, at first it looked like there was just a light source on the object that was just moving around the object. But as I looked closer, it was like, no, these are like bulbs that are being lit in a sequence to make it look like a light is moving around this object. And it had two effects. One, as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, that's so low tech. You know, this object isn't making any noise. It's moving very slowly. It's like too slow to be some sort of normal kind of propulsion. Like, it must be some high tech kind of propulsion going on here. But at the same time, you got this low tech lighting effect going on. So that was perplexing. And just the perplexity of it just added to the foreboding, the creepiness of it. It was just so odd and just out of whack. It really was just, and it just made it that much more disturbing. And at the time when I first noticed it, it was pretty much like around 200 yards away from us, about 50 yards up in the sky. And it was coming at a pretty slow pace, but like I said, it wasn't making any noise. So I looked to my mom. She was standing to my left, and I told her that I was scared. And I noticed that she was praying, but I couldn't hear anything she was saying because she was at a very low voice. She was praying, and so I turned my attention back to the craft, which by this time I would say it was about 100 yards away, and coming closing in on us, and suddenly it just started going in the opposite direction. It didn't slow down, it didn't turn around, didn't wobble or anything like that. It just started going back exactly the same speed as it was coming towards us. It started going back away from us, went back the same exact path that it taken, and went right back down below the tree line where it came from. And I'm going to let my mom discuss her perspective on that event as she was standing right beside me.
I'm assuming that Donna and I detected this craft at about the same time, because when I looked at him, he was standing there just like in an amazement thing, but it was frightening to me. And as Don told you, I was praying, and I was telling the Lord that if this was of him, I was not afraid. I wouldn't be afraid, but I knew in my inner spirit that it was not of God. So I was praying and asking him to please make this thing go away. And I started rebuking it in the name of Jesus, that it would go away. And I said, Lord, I do not want any abduction here. Something come out and take us away, nobody knowing where we was or how we left or when we left or anything. And I didn't have anything of self-defense around there that I could pick up or anything to use against them, because it was coming so straight to us. I wouldn't have had time, and I didn't believe that it would have let me go into the house to get anything. So I was just standing there praying, and God answered that prayer, because it just suddenly, it didn't stop or pause or anything. It just started going backwards. And I just kept my eyes on it and just stood very still. I didn't move to run or do anything, to pick up a rock or nothing. I just stood there praying, and it left and went just backwards, straight backwards. Now, where it come from, I do not know. But anyway, that was that encounter. And we was not asleep. This was during the broad open daytime, but the sun was setting. And we did encounter this. Now, I will give this back to Don and let him tell you some other stuff. But in the meantime, I was living on Florida Avenue, which was about 6 or 7 blocks from where we moved from Crump Hill. And I was sitting on my front porch and having to look over to the northwest, and I saw this object going back and forth, back and forth. We do have a small airport there in Jasper, but it's just like for businessmen or something like that. It's nothing commercial about it. And so I didn't anticipate any of those planes, because you didn't hear it, and it was going back and forth. And most of those planes, when they leave the airport, they just go on to wherever they was going. But this one in particular was just going back and forth a certain distance, turn and come back, and then turn and go back, just like that. And at that time, I did not know that as it was going back and forth, it was getting closer to me, sitting there on the porch. But I did notice that as it was going back and forth, approaching me, it was getting larger and larger. So I jumped up to go into the house, and I saw my little neighbor across the street. His name was Brett. And I called him, and I said, Brett, come here, and I want to show you something. So he come across the street and stood on my top step, and I said, look at this. What do you think this is? And he looked, and I said he stared at it about 3 or 4 minutes, and he said, oh, Miss Davis, this is frightening me. I'm finna go home. I said, okay. I said, that's right. Just go on now. I'll be okay. So when he started off the step, this thing just got real fast and went over his house, passed over his house. And he hesitated in the road just looking at him between my house and his. And then he took off and ran on to his house and went in the inside. and it went over his house, and I went back toward in the direction of where I had just moved from Crump Hill when I first encountered this last thing that one of my nieces and little great niece and thing were visiting that afternoon. So I don't know where it went or anything, but I didn't see it the rest of that evening because I was looking for it. So that was the encounter that I had on Florida Avenue.
Okay, so I wanna talk about a couple of things that happened actually while I was in college. So when I had graduated high school, I went to undergraduate in University of the South at Swanee, Tennessee, and I remember this one evening on my it was my sophomore year, so that was in 2001, the fall of 2001. I remember my roommate and his girlfriend had come in to hang out. I think they were going to watch a movie. And I kind of just wanted to give them their space. So I decided to just take a ride around campus. And one of the things that I would like to do, especially when it was a clear night, there was a few points on the campus. The campus was up in the Appalachian Mountains, so there's a few points where they had cleared some of the brush and stuff away, and you could pretty much like park your car and just look out over the towns below and things like that. A lot of small farming towns around that area. So that's what I decided to do that night. I pulled up, parked the car, and I got out. I sat down on the hood, and I kind of reclined back to where my back was on the windshield, and my head, the back of my head was resting on the roof of the car, and I was just pretty much looking straight up in the air, because it was kind of isolated. It wasn't like but a mile or half a mile from my dorm, but it was pretty isolated there. And I like the stargaze. Really never had any kind of fascination with UFOs or anything like that. Wasn't expecting to see anything. So as I looked up, I noticed that there appeared to be like fireflies, and I really enjoyed seeing fireflies when I was little out in the backyard and stuff. All the little lime green lights of the fireflies and stuff. But I noticed these fireflies were a little bit different because the light was more like an amber orange color. And as I sat there looking, and my eyes got a little bit more adjusted to the darkness out there, because it was pretty dark. I noticed that what I was looking at wasn't right above my head. I kind of first thought that it was like a swarm of fireflies right above where I was sitting or kind of reclining back. But I noticed that what I was looking at was really, really high up in the sky. Seemed to be like almost in space, or very, very high up in the sky. And so I'm sitting there looking at these things, and they're not flying around like a firefly would fly. I'm seeing this light come into my field of view, and all of a sudden make like an angle turn. Sometimes like obtuse angles, sometimes acute angles, and just a bunch of them. And so once I realized the angles that these things were making, these lights, that's when I was like, I got to get out of here, because I remember when I was little watching shows about UFOs and stuff. Sometimes I would be up watching like Unsolved Mysteries or something like that, and they would have show accounts and stuff. And I remember hearing this one account of people seeing these things that would make angle turns, that planes and stuff that we knew about at least weren't able to do stuff like that. So I remembered that, and I jumped in my car and I drove back the camp was, like I said, about a half a mile away. And I didn't really tell anybody about it at first because I knew what I had seen was something out of the ordinary, and I just kind of wanted to get away from that place all by myself and just get around some more people. And so we're going to fast forward a little bit to when I was in grad school, actually the summer of 2007. I decided to stop in Atlanta, Georgia to celebrate my birthday. It was my uncle, my late uncle lived there. And so I would often go by whenever I was in the Atlanta area and stay at his place and go out and then come back at his place and rest and stuff like that. So me and a friend that I went to high school with decided to go out. He lived there. He had moved out there with his stepdad. He had been out there for a little while, so he knew Atlanta a little better than I did. And so he suggested we check out this little disco downtown Atlanta, 3-floor place, had a DJ on every floor, and on the top floor it was pretty much like the roof, and you see out over the city and stuff. Pretty nice place. So we're there having fun, and at some point we go up to the roof just to check it out and stuff. And I remember at one point I was standing and looking out over the skyline and stuff, really not paying much attention to the city that much, just kind of just hanging out and stuff. And all of a sudden I noticed in my field of looking, I was looking towards the southwest part of the sky. All of a sudden in my field of vision, I seen this craft, and it was going really, really fast, and it just zoomed from the southwest horizon, seemed to be heading towards the from the southeast part of the horizon, seemed to be going towards the northwest. And as soon as I seen it, I just felt, I got kind of angry for some reason. I was like, I don't want to say anything like this, And I didn't say anything, though. I didn't say a word. And some guy that was standing in front of us, me and my friend was standing right beside each other, but some guy that was standing in front of us, we didn't even know him. He turned to us and said, "Hey, did y'all see that?" And I didn't say anything. But my friend said, "Yeah, what was that?" And I kind of felt relieved that somebody else had seen it, but I still didn't say anything until after we had left that place and went back to my uncle's. Before I got out of the car, I asked him, what was that thing that you guys seen tonight? And he said it looked like a Dorito. Basically, it did. That's exactly what it looked like. A triangle-shaped craft. It was orange, and it was moving very, very fast.
So in this particular incident, it wasn't like, okay, so it was a triangular shaped craft, but it wasn't like there were individual lights on the craft. It was basically this triangular object that was completely just lit up. It was like it was glowing. It had its own luminescence. It wasn't super bright. You could clearly make out the triangular shape, and it was just a color against the night sky. You could see that it had a color to it, and that's about the best way I can describe it.
So I still hadn't seen anything like that since the craft that me and my mom saw together while we were living on Crump Hill. I haven't seen anything like that since. Although I must say that I've seen some lights similar to what I saw when I was in Swanee, but not doing exactly the same kind of thing. But around the South, there are places like hot spots, I guess you could say, where a lot of people have seen things for a long time. Like my mom was explaining, in Columbus, Mississippi, the people there are used to seeing things, and in that area has a history going way back. Again, I'm not a UFO enthusiast. I'm not a person that gets excited about this stuff, because from my experience on Crump Hill, these things have some spirituals going on here. And I want to bring that out and expose that some more too. But thank you guys for listening tonight. Thank you very much.